Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. Very exciting episode. I love doing these episodes and I think people really enjoy listening to them, and this one is not going to be any exception to that golden rule. Today's guest is one, a brilliant human being, and two, what they're doing is critically important to the energy transition. So the Fully Charged Show podcast, for those of you who haven't listened / watched it before, really focuses on the energy transition, electric ground transportation, clean technology. And today's guest is at the absolute epicenter of that transition. It's really important. But just before we start, I think it's worth mentioning that the entire team behind the Fully Charged Show are gearing up for our second Fully Charged Live Europe event in Amsterdam on the 24th to the 26th of November, and our first Fully Charged Awards show on the 24th of November. So this is really, really important, just in case you haven't done this yet. Do you drive an electric vehicle anywhere in the world? If so, have you voted for the first Fully Charged Awards yet? If not, all the details and all the links for all those things and the links for our podcast guest are all in the show notes, or in the explanation. If you're listening to this on a podcast app, they'll be in the notes, the show notes. That's what they're called. Let me get that clear in my own mind for everyone else. So today's guest is Nicolas Cuevas Gomez, and he is from a company called URBIX. And I'm not going to say anything about what URBIX do, because you will discover in the podcast, because it is fascinating and often it's an aspect of the technology we all use. Electric cars or no, we all use this technology. We all rely on this material. That we are all completely indebted to having this material knocking around. So please welcome Nicolas Cuevas Gomez to the Fully Charged Show podcast. But anyway, no, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, because what is peculiar. I'm going to start off with a thing that caught my attention. This is in a recent discussion with someone on one of our podcasts about, now I'm not going to remember the exact name of the stuff, petroleum coke calcined coke.
Yeah.
But it's coming, which we are exporting from one of our very big oil refineries in the UK, and we're exporting it to China. And
Phillips 66 does that. Yeah. Phillips. Yeah.
But it's it was such an obscure story, and we weren't talking about a graphite or anything related to it. It just came out of this, and I went, are we really? And that comes from, So then as soon as I knew I was talking to you, I need to ask you about that, which is not a good way of starting, because there's so many other things I need to learn first. But that was just...
Yeah, it is. It is one of those primary materials when making synthetic graphite. And, the UK noticed it. I think Sky News put up a massive article, a massive video piece on this where they were mentioning that I don't know how many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of tons get exported every year to China, so that coke can get processed for different applications, including anode for EVs, right?
Right, yeah. But that's so, can we go from the beginnings, if you don't mind? Because there's quite a lot of our viewers and listeners will be quite well informed about such topics, but I know some of them won't. So it would be really useful if you could just explain what graphite is, what we use it for, and what it is and what we use it for mostly at the moment. The real basic stuff.
So graphite, it's an interesting mineral. It's a non-metal that behaves like a metal. If you even look at it, sometimes you think, this is metal. It's an allotrope of carbon. It's a fancy word of a derivative of carbon, right? It's had applications for refractory, for steel making, practically, controlling heat thermal management, lubricants, because if you touch it, it's a dry lubricant. You practically slip pretty easily. And also, believe it or not, some people coat seeds with graphite so that they don't stick together. Soy seeds, soybeans, if you coat them with that, they won't stick together. So Um, so it's been used throughout time for many, many years, and
Right.
because it has very specific capabilities, it was selected as being the carbon properties. Some of these properties was selected so that it could be used in the negative part of the battery, which people now call the anode. Still, people don't realize that it's not just lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese inside a battery, but by volume, the negative side of the battery, what is what is what is required to be able to store energy, it's predominantly graphite, whether it is synthetic
Right.
made out of coke, as we discussed, or naturally made, right, or a blend.
Right.
So
Right. Because then, how would you naturally make it then if you don't use crude oil as a base, as part of the refining process? Where because I don't know where else can you dig it up?
yeah, that's practically what it is, right? So
Right.
there's a saying, and like everything in this world is either farmed or dug up, right?
Or dug up. Yeah.
So yeah, so it is dug up, and it looks. You grab a rock. I'll just give you an example. A rock might be 5 or 10% content of this specific carbon of interest or graphite of interest at a mine level. That gets crushed, that gets milled into fine powders, and it undergoes a process called flotation. Flotation is exactly what it sounds like. It's that you spike a certain liquid with a reactive agent that allows the separation the of the mineral of interest to be captured by this
Right.
little bubble and be floated up, and the rest sediments down, right? And that
Right.
gets practically almost, remember Stella Artois in those commercials when you overflow the foam and they just go like that with a little bar?
Brush it off.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it is. It's just like you
Wow.
take the foam off, and that little foam gets processed, dried, and then you have beautifully a 94 to 97% flake graphite material that gets
Right.
shipped on a ton basis super
Yeah.
sack to the processors like us, so that we can elevate that purity to 99.9, shape it so that it can be used inside a battery.
Right. So the graphite that you work with is that primarily then for batteries? That's that's where it's because I do understand that it's been used in other applications, but that's what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
at the moment, the focus of the company, the lowest hanging fruit, given this exuberance, if you want to call it what it is, rational or irrational, just the exuberance of the EV revolution,
Yeah.
um, and our capabilities to be able to process graphite adequately actually match perfectly, so that it made it so that we're focused on EVs at this stage, or lithium ion
I mean,
batteries for
it
that
must have
matter.
been, I mean, there must have been a real big change in the industry because I'm assuming, like, let's go back 20 years, there was still a demand for graphite. It was still used in industrial processes, but probably not anything like on the scale or the amounts that we need now. Would that be true to say?
Yeah, I would even push that statement to saying 4 years ago or even
Right,
five
that
years ago.
recently.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly. Um, yes, especially outside of China, I feel that there's been that lag on adoption
Yeah.
of EVs for many reasons, right?
Yeah.
They're not very practical, assets, to be honest, especially if you don't have an adequate charging system or infrastructure. Um, and the whole argument of reducing the carbon footprint gets absolutely defeated if you are charging your vehicle with fossil fuel based energy, and also if you look at the carbon footprint of a battery, if you make an analysis on that, you need to be cognizant of the fact that there's a, 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 a real probability that the initial carbon footprint of you buying an EV versus buying a conventional petrol car or ICE car, at the moment of you walking out of that dealership, your carbon footprint might be a bit higher if you do that EV,
Yeah.
with the hope that because your renewable energy you're charging that car with will actually start actually carving out, and
Yeah.
you become more environmentally friendly as a human.
Yes.
So
No, I mean, my argument has always been a car is a car, effectively. It still has an impact, doesn't matter what, and no matter how many green leaves and flowers you paint on the side of a car, it's a car and it's made in a big
yeah.
factory and it uses materials we have to produce and we have to dig
Yeah,
up.
so the way I say, right, is that there'll never be, you can target net zero, but we'll never be humanly. We can't
No,
Humans cannot be zero greenhouse emitting. We fart, and that's methane. So there you go.
yeah. I mean, I never fart, but I know people who do. Oh no, sorry, I got that
Absolutely.
wrong.
Yeah.
My wife never farts ever.
Yeah, exactly. That's the right. That's the right.
That's the
Yeah.
right one. But then,
Yeah. There you go.
can you? So can that you did kind of brush over that, but I'd love to explain its role in a battery because one of its properties is it can hold a charge, or it can be is it conductive? I think that's my
Yes,
question.
it is.
Yeah, right.
And it has a magnificent storing capability because the lithium
Right.
ions actually fit quite adequately inside the actual graphite powder itself.
Right.
What's in the negative side of a battery? There's many components, but if you stick to the graphite part, to the natural component, it's a little like micron-sized sphere. It's like a little ball, right?
Right.
And the purpose of that ball is to act like a sponge of energy. So when you actually charge a battery, the ions and the electrons flow into the negative side of a battery, and it just impregnates its sponge so that it just
Right.
soaks up all this energy, right? And
Right.
when you use it, it flows back, and then you can use your product, right?
Yeah.
That's how it works, and that's one cycle. The charge, discharge. That's
And the
your
discharge.
cycle.
Yeah.
It's like soak up the sponge and then squeeze
Squeeze
the
it out.
sponge,
Yeah.
and that's what. Yeah, so that's what the negative side of a battery does.
Right. And I mean, okay, I'm trying very hard because I've got a lot of questions that I've worked out, but I try not to go off in too many tangents. But when the charge discharge cycles that a battery has, we know there are limits and they gradually loses some capacity. Is that affected? Is that capacity loss over time part caused by graphite, or is that the other materials in the battery? Because I don't know what graphite's
Uh,
role is as regards that. I mean, does it get worn out? Does the sponge go
it does. It
soggy?
really does, right?
Right.
So what happens is like, how do I explain it? So there is a necessary step to finalizing a battery to be able to put it in a product. In this case, an EV.
Right.
And that's the formation of an SEI layer, right? SEI layer, think of it like when you lithiate the anode for the first time, right? The initial charge, you start forming
Right.
almost like a cataract around the actual ball of graphite,
Right.
right? Which it's required so that you can practically, how you used to prime the engines when you wanted to fly a P-51 Mustang, or you need to prime the engine to get it going. That's priming practically the anode, right? Just prime the anode. But throughout time, that layer, SEI layer, can also become a hindrance to the performance of the anode and becomes deteriorate. It begins to deteriorate, right? Every charge, discharge. Now batteries have become better and better as time has gone by. So if you were to buy an iPhone 10, for instance, in 2012, you would have noticed that your battery became very inefficient by 6 months to a year. Whereas now, if you buy an iPhone, it lasts pretty good, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and also, they control the charging.
Right.
The charging control is integral in this, right? The charging, the battery management system.
Yeah. And I think I mean, this is one of my arguments when people who don't know anything about electric cars and they go, well, the battery in my phone or my laptop, that doesn't last many years. And I go, yeah, but that's got very basic battery management, whereas a car's, the battery management, the way it's charged is very sophisticated and becoming increasingly sophisticated, I would say.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
But then, so I know that graphite has been deemed a critical mineral in the United States really recently. Is that correct? And if so, can you explain why that is?
You see, recently, as in 2017, I believe the first executive order was put out in January, and then in the fall of 2020, it was kind of like bundled into another executive order, and then the new president came in, and then practically reissued a similar executive order, deeming it critical.
Right.
And the reason. The primary reason that why it became a critical mineral is because if you look at the components of a battery and the makeup of a battery, it's so critical it makes up such a big part of the battery. And when you look at the United States processing capabilities, meaning those companies that have the ability to actually give you a finished product without any dependency whatsoever on a call it a potential adversary like China,
Right.
then you say, oh crap, we're very weak in this. And yes, we're very weak. And then we also don't have any extraction capability that's fully installed for even natural graphite, let
Right.
alone the processing. There's a lot of companies like us building up capacity, but we won't be up and running until 25, 26.
Right. Right. Because that's the other thing we haven't mentioned. So URBIX is the company that you've founded, and that is so from what I gather, you're not yet producing graphite. You're in the process of developing a big plant that will produce a lot. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, so this is we're in construction of our first commercial scale demonstration facility. We'll
Right.
have a capacity of about 1,000 metric tons. And with the recent investment that we got, that was announced on Monday with Appian Capital Advisory, they are
Yeah.
a large mining investment firm that not only invests, but they also operate the mining assets. We've been
Right.
able to formulate a joint development agreement with them so that they can feed material from their graphite mine into our processing facility and start developing almost like a cluster of economic and national security for the United States and the North America region to supply anode.
Right. Because the thing that we're hearing about a lot, and this is why I really wanted to talk to you, there's big news which we've had on our kind of national news and newspapers about huge battery factories being built in the United States. But whenever I read those, I go, well, yeah, where's the stuff that you make the batteries coming from? And that was immediately, I went, yeah, there we go. Here's a clue, because that is, in a sense, the end process, isn't it? The actual making the battery that's like the last bit you do. There's quite a lot that goes before that. In a sense, it's the same argument I've been making for the last 15 years is, we measure tailpipe emissions as a way of judging the cleanliness or otherwise of a combustion vehicle. And
Yeah.
that's only one bit of it, because when I've been lucky enough to go around a huge oil refinery in this country and see, incredibly impressive technology, the effort, the energy, the technology that goes to produce that gasoline before you burn it in your car. There's a journey. And in a sense, you see a battery, there's been a journey to get to that battery. There's many differences as well.
Yeah, and I think I like that analogy of the petrol, right, and the oil. For the first time in history, the OEMs are faced with a massive challenge that they never faced before.
Yeah.
And it is very simple. Imagine if the OEM for an internal combustion engine car, they needed to figure out the logistics of refining the oil, right?
Yeah.
Before they just put a tank and then we're done. For the first time now, you have a battery that is part of the structural aspects of the actual car, and they're having to find themselves do a supply chain analysis for 6 different quote unquote oils, which are your critical minerals that they've never had to be faced with this challenge before. So it's echelons of complexity that they're faced with.
And it does feel like at the moment that the companies that have no legacy in making internal combustion engines, and the obvious one is Tesla, but the ones that are coming up, Rivian, maybe you could argue Lucid, but also very, very obviously the Chinese companies that they haven't made combustion engines. They started as electric car makers, and they're leaps and bounds ahead. This is something that we're facing in Europe in a really big way, and it's causing a very noticeable reaction now that suddenly people have realized, oh, these cars, the cheaper ones that we can afford, come from China. They're not from Renault or Nissan or BMW or Volkswagen or Audi. They're from China. I have a Chinese car here. In fact, I have two, because the Tesla I've got was also built in China. I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's just the whole. You can always compare it to steering a massive ship, or that 2-decker A380 taking off needs a longer runway, right? But once it takes off, it goes.
Yeah.
It's the same analogy. You have a company in Tesla that has magnificent leadership, a really solid strategy, but they've never had to worry about ICEs, infrastructure investment that they've done for trillions. I would argue hundreds of billions of dollars in infrastructure that they've
Absolutely.
invested that
Yeah.
they now magically need to just wipe away. It's,
Yeah.
it's very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I once had a conversation quite a few years ago now with a Volkswagen executive, someone quite high up in that company. And I said, oh, it must be difficult to know what to do with, the hundreds of people that make combustion engines. And he just shook his head and he went, it's not hundreds, Robert, it's about 11,000. That's their entire job all around the world, not in one location, all around the world, is making combustion engines. And that's what do
And
you
it
do?
has been for 25 years.
And it has, or longer with them, 50 years. But the other thing that's been in the news here recently, which is again sort of got into the general news feed, is the Chinese starting to curb graphite exports. So they presumably were exporting that material for battery manufacturers around the world, and if they're getting a bit moody and not exporting it, which is, I mean, those things are in a sense way above my pay grade, like international trade relations. I just go, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's very complicated.
I believe it's more of an amuse bouche, when you go to a nice expensive restaurant, they give you this like thing in your mouth so that it just clears your palate and makes you realize it's about to happen.
Yeah.
It's more of an amuse bouche, I feel, saber rattling, if you want to say that, right? Because you can still export, you would just need to get the license, and there's plenty of exporters that do have a license to export now, but they just are thinking about it. And it's also a warning sign for us that we really need to take this seriously. If we're going to use our citizens' money to be able to enable this energy transition, we need to be very careful as to how we do it. We need to be pragmatic. We need to be very assertive as well. And this type of announcements only, elevates the stakes, I feel, and for us to realize that we are very weak in that front. And I feel that whether this administration and the previous administration agreed or not, I think there's one common denominator, is the security of our manufacturing capabilities. And I feel that the programs that have been put out there are well intentioned, and the execution now will be key.
Yeah. No, I mean, it'll be very interesting to see what happens in the next sort of 18 months regarding that. But I mean, what is interesting, so your plant then will come online and start producing. So did you say 2025? Roughly that?
Our goal is Q4 2025, Q1 2026 to have it going, right? Especially with this joint development agreement partnership that practically vertically integrates the supply chain in a very, very attractive manner. Absolutely.
But then that's because you don't have to go into detail, because I'm sure most of us wouldn't understand it. But when I have got no kind of mental picture of a graphite production facility. I mean, I've been around a lot of factories.
Let's show you.
All right.
Yeah, I'll show you. I know. Too bad you can't put this visuals in the podcast, but I'll show you, man.
Well, there's some people watch it, but I mean that's.
Oh, okay. All right. Well,
and you've got your hard. I'll describe it though. You're putting your hard hat on there, walking through the office. I hope we don't lose the signal. That's my worry.
Yeah. No, we won't. I'm fine.
You won't. Okay.
For ours, it's a pretty small space right here. What you'll see here is practically what we call the electrochemical lab, where we grab our powder and put full cells together, full cell chemistry to test, run the cycling, and share with our OEM partners. This is practically.
You make experimental batteries that you can charge and discharge.
Absolutely. Yeah, you need to, because the data and the measurement systems, you need to match your measurement system that you have with the ones that the OEMs have. So you're correlating data right on the feedbacks. We also need to measure the purity, etc. Right. So this is our pilot line right here, which is a 40 metric ton per year line. Again, the way that we purify our graphite doesn't use the conventional hydrofluoric or hydrochloric acid approach. And it elevates the purity whilst minimizing the actual carbon footprint, right? And this is the facility here. That big tower that you see right there is where we make the balls. We're talking about balls the size of one tenth the thickness of your hair. What I meant.
Wow.
And And yeah, that's what we're doing here. You see a bunch of boxes. This is the equipment that is being installed,
Right.
so that we have the 1,000 metric ton per year line here. And this right here is what's going to be multiplied about 30 times so that we can actually get it to the next phase of scalability. So the same
Wow.
equipment that will be installed here will be Legoed out, is
Yeah.
the right word, or modularized, so that
Yeah.
we can actually get it to a 30,000 metric ton facility. Yeah.
Wow. So
Not one piece
that's
of
your,
equipment at this moment comes from China.
none of it comes from China, did you say?
Not
That,
one piece of equipment at
that's
this moment
very
comes from
interesting,
China.
isn't it? Because, that's like in a sense, a topic that isn't, unique to this, but, the amount of our manufacturing we've exported in the last 40 years to China
Yeah.
has been staggering. And that is Europe and the United States both went on that journey. And so for you to be able to
Exactly.
get that kind of level of high-tech equipment without going to China I'm really impressed. That's very,
Yeah, I mean, you get innovative, you get clever, and there's ways of doing it.
yeah,
Again, I'm not. How do you say this? The exercise here is I believe in trading all around,
yeah,
and it should happen.
yeah.
But swinging one pendulum or just putting all your eggs in one basket is never a wise idea, right?
No, no. But is there because that's one thing you kind of alluded to there. Is there a difference? Is there, well, here we go. I'll try and do it try and ask the question in a sensible way. Is there a graphite factory production facility in the United States that makes graphite in a different way to you? I mean, are you actually producing this material in a novel way or in a slightly adapted way?
We are.
Or
That's the
right,
value proposition of us, right? At
right,
this stage right now, there's the other anode makers that are in they want to become processors like we are at a commercial scale to supply the demand. Some of them are using the conventional approach, which is hydrochloric acid treatment, and then that or high temperature oven treatment for prolonged periods of
right,
time, using Chinese equipment. Um,
right.
and listen, that's fine, because at the end of the day, we need capacity. And if
Yeah,
the name of the game is to do it in the US, well, I don't care if it's being made with Chinese, Mexican, Canadian equipment. At the end of the day, if I'm the government, I want to get the ball rolling, right?
you want to get
Um,
it producing. Yeah,
the approach that we took was one that's a bit different from inception. We started from a beaker size technology in 2014, and we've been slowly scaling it to what you just saw.
yeah,
Um, and and we were able to achieve this without a purification mechanism that is more environmentally friendly, that doesn't use the hydrofluoric or hydrochloric acid approach.
right.
And the shaping of the graphite particles is, I don't know if you follow me here, it's a bottom up approach instead of a top bottom approach, right? So if you visualize a flake of graphite, a single flake of graphite about, 1/10 the size of your pinky nail, let's say, right? One
Right.
flake of graphite. And you want to minimize that flake of graphite to a little spherical ball.
Yeah.
The top bottom approach is you beat the crap out of it through attrition milling, okay, till you actually get it to a small microscopic particle ball, right?
Right.
What we do is we create a mechanism of bending these flakes of graphite one into each other, all
Right.
right, so that we can agglomerate a small ball into a larger ball. Okay.
Wow.
That exercise of building almost an onion from the inside out at a microscopic level allows us to be able to dope it with other materials to enhance the performance of the anode itself for
Right.
future anode necessities.
Yeah.
So that's the technology. So our yields are very high, about twice as much as the industry conventionally has,
Wow.
and the ability to leave the door open for the next generation development. Blending is already very popular within the anode or the OEMs,
Right.
and if we can figure out a way of collaborating with them to actually develop this and do it for them, it's a value add proposition.
Yeah. But I mean, just this alone, I think what you're saying is how, it's one of the things that keeps me interested in this topic is that you could just say, oh, well, we had we've just done an episode about the beginnings of lithium ion batteries, and that was where they came from and how long they've been around and how they've developed in that time. But what is so exciting is that there are technologies like you've developed that have really come about because of the demand, and that demand is because we've started making electric cars with what were effectively batteries that we put in cameras and laptops. That's where they were like 25 years ago. That's all you could get, and that is it's caused so many knock-on challenges and benefits. It's nothing's ever all positive, but there's a lot of amazing technologies that I feel have started to develop and are emerging out of that demand.
Yes, and all it takes is a spark, right? Because I cannot tell you with a straight face that in 2014 we would be here. I had any thought that we would be here. In fact, if in 2014 I knew how hard it would be to get to where we are now, I probably wouldn't have started in this journey with the other co-founders, right? So there's a bit of ignorance or naivete or whatever you say in English in that sense. But it's just a spark. The idea that we had in 2014 got developed into what URBIX is today because of the contribution of the members at URBIX. Right. So it's not, I don't particularly believe that it's just one visionary. The majority, maybe 5% of the time you have great human beings that are geniuses and know everything, but 95% of the time or more is just an agglomeration of ideas and pivoting around because it got mentioned over drinks, or it was a late night at the office and we were tired and then somebody said something that maybe something stupid, but the next day it was so clever. So, and the ability to be able to survive that long while the market begins to create or generate that excitement is key as well. There's an element of luck or God or whatever you call it, right? So there.
Yeah, because I mean, in 2014, I was driving an electric car, but I was very special back then because there were very few of them around, and that growth we've seen in the period your company has been running has been pretty exceptional. I mean, there's plenty of pitfalls still ahead, and it's not all smooth running. So there's also, just quickly, because I'm in the UK and they're asking about, there has been news recently about you expanding here or having some connection with the UK. Can you talk about that yet?
Yeah, so early last year, we were trying to figure out, when you're fundraising, you're trying to explore as many fronts as possible, especially when you're a private company. And there was an opportunity to consider something in the UK. So, we kicked off our relationship with the now announced Appian deal here.
Right.
And they are bringing a lot of strategic value to us, not only with the graph coa material from Brazil, but also a sense of structure that I think a startup like URBIX needed, and a wonderful team, and establishing a real focus on what we got to do now with this capital that we have, and a very assertive path to execution, and the UK plans henceforth have been put aside until we actually have this facility built in the US first. Yes.
Right. But there is potential for growth here. Is that?
Oh, absolutely. Right. I see the UK as like, here goes another religious analogy. Like, what probably Michelangelo saw at the Sistine Chapel, like without anything in it, right?
Yes.
I mean, you guys are nobody wants to be, well, not nobody, but not a lot of companies want to be in the UK. I see the contrary. I see if you have a technology that is low in carbon footprint, that is modular, that can add value to, and can be placed in a country like the UK, which I think it can, it'll be a great solution for the UK, and you'll have a demand. You have at least 60 to 90 gigawatt hours of demand there, which translates to a quite significant amount. It's about 100,000 metric tons of graphite at most, I think, in a year.
Yeah. And I mean, today, a good example, not always all the time, but today we reached 62% of our grid generation was from offshore wind. 62%.
That's
So,
amazing.
which is amazing. And this is during a working day. It's not at the weekend or at night. It's in the daytime
Yeah.
when the demand is high. So that is, that that will within, I mean, this is from talking to people who operate the generating capacity and the national grid. We will, within the next 4 years, there will be days when we're 100% powered by wind. That will happen.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful.
We're very lucky. We're blessed with a very large shoreline with a lot of shallow water, which means that when you sail across it in a ferry, you get seasick because it's really rough. It's not very big, but my God, the waves are big because it's only about that deep. Yeah. There's nothing there.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
But so one. So I don't want to keep you too long, but this is really fascinating stuff. But here's the thing. So there's been an enormous amount of questioning. So, okay, one of the things that I first confronted when I first talked about electric cars, when I first started this, was we'll throw the batteries away after 3 years because they'll just wear out. That was, and then you go, well, I didn't know at the time. When people said that, I went, that would be awful if that's what we do. These cars aren't going to work. And then I had a car for like 9 years with the same battery and it was fine. I mean, it was a Nissan Leaf, so it was never a brilliant range. It was always a bit extremely compromised, but it didn't suddenly stop working after 3 years. But the point is, we're now getting a lot of batteries from those first generation of cars that have really come to the end of their useful life. We've seen examples where they're reused, repackaged and reused. In fact, the first battery from my Nissan Leaf now helps run a factory in Amsterdam. But eventually you've got to recycle them. What I want to know is the graphite you produce that then goes to be made into a battery, is used in a battery for 10, 15 years, and then is recycled. Can you do anything with that graphite, or do you not need to? Can that be used by other battery manufacturers? At this stage, material, we don't know, I guess.
Yeah, so there's a thing called black mass, right? When you recycle a battery. And the black mass, it's almost, I don't want to say impossible because nothing's impossible, but it's very difficult. Almost, it doesn't make any economic sense to look for the graphite in that black mass.
Right.
So at this stage, I wouldn't, and you can talk to other people in the industry, they might have a different opinion, but we've done the analysis on recycling. And unless you have free power, no, because I wouldn't. Yeah, so
no, it's not something
that can. Yeah, it doesn't at this stage. For how cheap the graphite is being purchased in the market right now,
right,
and the amount of processing it will require, and the reshaping, and this whole is just a pain in the neck.
Not, and that is quite interesting actually, because it is when you think of the materials in a battery, when you say when you how a battery is expensive, the materials are expensive. They're not all expensive. I think that sounds like a very, very key point. Obviously nickel, cobalt, copper, there's a lot of expensive stuff that we understand. But so then graphite is not an expensive stuff per ton in comparison with say
and
nickel.
if you look at it, it's 30% of a cell, and it's about 6 to 8% of the cost in the cell.
Right. Wow. Really small amount.
So, really small, and it's 30% of it in terms of volume and mass, right?
Yeah. And also, if you took a sack of secondhand graphite and threw it on a field, is it poisonous? Is it toxic? Is it going to spoil the water course? Is it going to kill fish? I don't know.
I wouldn't do it. But maybe if you figure out a mechanism to repurpose it for steel making, sure, that might be like black mass, or like maybe something similar to that, or repurposing it in other applications that are relevant.
Right.
Yeah.
So I see. So it is actually, because it just feels like a kind of naturally occurring product, but in effect, it has been treated to such an extent that it isn't. You couldn't kind of mix it with a bit of soil and it becomes earth. It does need to be.
I feel that if you maybe burn something hot enough for a long period of time, you'll graphitize it eventually. Maybe there's something to be had there. But whoever's willing to do that and figure out the market and not lose money, it's great. Keep in mind that at the end of the day, this electric revolution is not going to happen if the EBITDAs in the sheets are in red, right? So people need to make money, or else we're not in this to just you know, that we are in this with a mission, with a purpose of and values that are underpin what we're doing, which is environmentally friendly and stuff. But if we're not making money, you know,
it's not going to happen. Yeah.
exactly.
No, and I mean, I think we're seeing that even with China, with huge government subsidies and support from. Eventually, a government goes, "Hang on a minute, can you make some money?"
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's been fascinating talking to you, and it is. And I've just seen some other questions.
Go
I've
ahead.
got
I'm here.
two more questions. No, I don't want to keep you too long. But a few years ago, we heard an enormous amount about graphene as opposed to graphite, and that graphene was the miracle material. Then everything was going to be made of graphene, and it was going to change the world. And I'm very happy about that. I'm still waiting. I haven't seen anything.
Me too. So we did the graphene play in 15, 16, and 17. I even did a TED talk in Spanish for that, and the reality is that one of them was that everything was being defined as graphene. That's the problem, and there's so many utilizations for it. The issue was, how do you functionalize it into a product that can actually then be sold? You can't just sell the powder. Even if you sell that powder, you were teaching the potential customers to functionalize it into something that they needed. And at that time, you would just be adding levels of expertise that actually deviated you from the core focus of what a company was trying to do. So, I think we're all still waiting for the graphene. It sounds wonderful, but again, there's a real market out there, and the real market is EVs and spherical graphite for us. Yeah.
But then one last thing, because I just did think that the Toyota recently announced the mass production. Well, they've announced it. I'm sure they're going to back off and then come back again. Who knows? It's very confusing messaging coming out of there. But that they're going to start the mass production of solid state batteries. So there's two questions. I mean, are there battery chemistries emerging that don't need graphite, and or does? Oh, right, there are. Okay.
Solid state and lithium metal, batteries like that. But I would challenge what, one, mass production means in that statement, and two, go back to 2017 and look at the story of graphene and compare that to solid state as well.
Right. Yeah.
I hope it happens, because we're going to need all the demand that we can, and eventually, if in 2035 we're still as URBIX even producing graphite to sell to anodes, then I think I'm not doing my job right. It'd be something we hope that by then we're going to have an evolved product that's still relevant to energy storage, right? Or energy in general, whether it is graphite for nuclear energy reactors and things like that. Sneak peek. I wish nothing but the best, and the adoption of a new technology doesn't come immediate, because there's, again, billions of dollars being invested in infrastructure at the moment, and then also there's the price aspects, right? That maybe it can fit into a Lexus $150,000 car, but not into your conventional Camry, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the big change, isn't it? Because that is something.
So the trick and everything is that dollar sign over the kilowatt.
Yeah.
That is the math.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've done a lot of work here with a company called Benchmark Mineral Intelligence. I don't know if they're a they're a data company, and they're based in the city of London. So they're looking at all the materials that are being extracted and refined and all that stuff. And they've
ask Simon if he knows me.
So you know Simon. There you go.
I had dinner with him 3 weeks ago.
I've met very few people who don't know him. He definitely gets around.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I don't think I chat to him about work anymore. I think it's just. I don't think I've ever texted him about anything regarding to the market. It's just that I think it's a friendship that has just started. So
But they were pitching the sub $100 a kilowatt hour battery manufacturing. That we're reaching that point, which is I think quite a critical point. And what is clear from talking to you is the one thing that won't push it over that limit is is graphite, because that's,
Yeah,
you know, that
exactly.
cost per cell is very low, isn't it? That's not, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But Nico, it's been amazing talking to you. It's been at the very limit of my understanding, but you've really helped me, and I'm really grateful for that. And I hope our listeners have gleaned something from it as well. And I would love to talk to you again. I mean, hopefully at some point, either myself or someone from our company can come and see your production facility when it's up and running, and we can sort of do a
Yeah,
kind of update on what's going on. Would be amazing.
here it is. We'll get you
Yeah,
a taco cart too, so we'll get
if there's
everything
a
going
taco
for you.
cart, it can't go wrong.
When people say we'll roll out the red carpet, that's what I mean by that. We'll get a taco cart for you.
Look at a taco cart. That's fantastic. No, well, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure
Absolutely,
talking to you, genuinely. All right.
Alrighty. Thanks,
Take
man.
care.
Thank you.
Bye. Really hope you enjoyed that. Really hope we see you either in Amsterdam or maybe next year, early next year in Sydney, or maybe a little bit later than that in London, or maybe a little bit later than that in Harrogate, or maybe a little bit later than that. I won't go on. A lot of live shows coming up, a lot of amazing episodes coming up. Please do stay tuned to the Fully Charged show and the Everything Electric show, just in case you didn't know about that. That's our sister show, which is where this is broadcast from. In terms of its visual component, you can also download it on your favorite podcast apps. And I think at that point, it's time for this old man to shuffle off and have a cup of tea. So as always, if you have been, thank you for listening.